Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Chicago Communicator News Media On Point. This evening with HUD, Mr. Dan Hike and Nicole Winston. Now, are there other members to the team that you all need to introduce?
Our public affairs officer, Miss Kim McMorris, is also on.
All right. So I'd just like to welcome you all to the show and give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and tell our viewing audience who you are and what role you play with HUD. And then we'll go into our questions, if you don't mind.
Absolutely, absolutely. First, like I was saying before, I'm happy to be here. Anytime I get to put a collared shirt on, I feel better, especially after 2 years of the pandemic. So it's great to see everyone's smiling face. My name is Daniel Hike. I'm with the Detroit field office for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. I am a management and program analyst within the field policy and management, but I'm also the regional Section 3 point of contact. My background, I've been with HUD now about 11 years. Before that, I spent 21 years in the military. Having served several different places. And I grew up originally from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, product of low-income housing tax credit properties. So I have a passion for working with communities to develop economic opportunities to assist individuals within low-income areas of neighborhood.
Miss Winston, tell us who you are and what role you play.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Nicole Winston. I'm a program analyst in our Chicago field office. I work pretty closely with Dan. As he mentioned, he's our Section 3 point of contact. And so I work on Section 3 as well, and am often going through him, asking him tons of Section 3 questions for guidance. So you really picked the right person to talk to about Section 3. I'm here to kind of just support, listen in. Obviously, like I said, I work in Chicago and in the Illinois field office, so really do Section 3 specific work in Illinois. And so I'm really happy to be here. I appreciate you having us.
We're happy to have you. Thank you.
Thank you. I will let you take it away.
Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have these experts online, and we invited them to tell us about Section 3. So I sent them some questions, and they are prepared to answer those questions for us. So the first question is, when and why was HUD Section 3 established?
And that's a great question, because it's always good to start at the beginning, right? It's always good to start at like, okay, where did this come from and why?
Yeah.
And Section 3 has been around a long time. It was actually part of the Housing and Urban Development Act of 1968. And the actual statute itself is it's less than 2 pages. But if you're really trying to find a way to get to sleep at night, I recommend reading it. But at its core, it's real simple. It's to ensure that employment and other economic opportunities that are generated with certain HUD funding and financial assistance shall, to the greatest extent feasible, be directed to low and very low income individuals, particularly those who are recipients of government assisted housing. So in plain language, what that means is that any jobs, training, or contracts that arise out of HUD funding not only assist that area where that funding is being spent, but also help develop the individuals and provide economic opportunity to those individuals where those projects are being done. So it sat dormant for a long time until about 1995, when what was called the old rule. You may have heard that saying that when we're talking the old rule, and that rule focused on hires and a percentage of contracts. So a certain number of hires or a certain percentage of contracts had to go to low or very low income individuals or companies that hired them. The problem with that is that kind of incentivized temporary hiring, and it didn't really fulfill the intent of the statute, because what entities would do is they would hire someone temporarily, then they hire them again, and it would count as 2.
Okay.
Around 2020, there was a new rule that was put into place. You'll hear us call it the new rule that kind of changed how HUD is regulating or implementing Section 3, which is why you're starting to hear about it more often now. And this rule focuses on labor hours worked. So it's focusing on not just the hiring, but the number of labor hours worked on a project, and then developing an individual throughout, and then maintaining them and working with them. So it's not looking at turnover or hires. It's looking at, let's set aside a certain amount of hours on a project dedicated toward that have to be worked by low or very low income individuals. And those are called benchmarks. So
benchmarks.
Yep. So the current benchmarks, and they're updated every 3 years, but the current benchmarks are 25% of labor hours go to Section 3 workers, which are low or very low income individuals. And 5% go to targeted Section 3 workers. And the targeted Section 3 worker are those workers that live within a mile of that project or live within the housing authority that's doing the contracting. So it's trying to assist and amplify that funding that's going into that community. So that's the intent behind focusing on labor hours. So let's, and just if you indulge me a little bit, let's talk about an example of what that means. So let's say the city of Chicago is doing a water main project utilizing about $250,000 of CDBG.
Mm-hmm.
By the nature of CDBG, that project is being done in a low or moderate income census tract. So what Section 3 does is it then says, okay, 25% of that funding or those labor hours need to be worked by a Section 3 low or very low income individual, and that works on that project, and then 5% of those labor hours have to be worked up by someone that lives within a mile of that project. So it's it's working on putting that funding in those communities that are most disadvantaged, and then impacting them not only just by providing a resource, but also developing the skills within that community.
So has that happened? I mean, is that happening, Dan? Are these people in the community working on these projects that HUD is doing in low and very low income communities?
So this rule went into effect in 2020. Reporting on it started in July of 2021, and the systems just went online for some of the reporting as of November of last year. So I can talk a little bit about where we are with those numbers.
Okay.
But realizing this is a new shift for HUD and a new focus, right? So this is something that it has been worked on, being put into place and implemented over just the less than a year, really, since November. So is it happening? I'd like to see it happen more, and I think this rule will help get there.
Okay. We have our investigative reporter, Mr. Lionel Nixon, online. Lionel, would you like to ask your question? Question number 2.
So the way that and I'm going to call it the new rule, because that's how most people that we're more familiar with talking about it, and that distinguishes it from what was in place previously. So under the new rule, it's designed to be marketed at several levels. So the benchmarks require a certain number of labor hours to be worked by low or very low income individuals. But if those benchmarks aren't met, there's a qualitative aspect of the rule. So that recipient then has to report on what efforts they take to make the local public and those aware of these opportunities. What training programs did they implement? Are they doing apprenticeship programs? Are they doing training? Are they developing? Are they doing affirmative outreach to try to reach individuals that are low or very low income individuals to work? So that's the qualitative aspect. So that's the first line of public awareness, is that those recipients are responsible for doing that outreach. Is that affirmative step, right? So that's the greatest extent feasible piece I mentioned before. They have to show they're doing something beyond their normal procurement process. They have to show that they're doing something to do an outreach, to do something just beyond saying, I have this contracting opportunity. So that's the first step. And then after that, at the regional level, like Nicole and myself at the field office levels are doing partnerships with SBA, partnerships with other federal and state partners, to do just awareness campaigns. Like, what is Section 3? What does it mean to be a Section 3 worker? What does it mean to be a Section 3 business? And then on top of that, we've developed some resource hubs and some resources that are available to try to bring all this information into one spot for ease of use and ease of access for the public, for the press, for the recipients, for the businesses, and they can access this information in a way that is a little easier to understand, right? Because there's a lot of different places you can go to and reach, to try and find this information at the federal level, but then every state has its own focused resources. So, the resource hub we developed is a regional hub, but then it has an individual state page as well that focuses in on the resources that are available within the state. And I just want to, just give Nicole an opportunity, because this is an area where that, the Chicago area and that kind of thing, I just, she can chime in whenever she likes, but, that's kind of the focus of the public outreach campaign.
Okay. Nicole, you have you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything to Dan's point. In the Illinois office, we've been currently doing a lot of work with PTACs, or Procurement Technical Assistance Centers, to do exactly what Dan is talking about, kind of raise awareness and really help Section 3 businesses figure out how to do business with agencies that do have these federal funds.
Yes.
And I think something that we found is a lot of the agencies want to do this work with Section 3. They want to meet the requirements. It's a matter of finding the businesses. And for the businesses, they want to connect with the agencies and aren't entirely sure of the step-by-step process. So
exactly,
that's kind of been the goal for us in working with the PTACs and then other agencies, like I said, who are receiving federal funds and are searching for these businesses.
All right, so please explain, what is Section 3 and how does it benefit the community? And we've talked a little bit about this, right? But first off, it's important to understand that Section 3 is a preference, right? It's not when a contract is awarded through Section 3, just because you're a Section 3 business does not mean you automatically receive the contract, right? It's just a preference. It's something that communities work toward, or recipients work toward, to meet the benchmarks. You still, to receive the contract, you still have to meet all other state, local, and federal requirements. So you have to have capacity, you have to have the proper licensing, you have to have all those normal things that go along with that. So it's important to realize that that's what Section 3 is. It's a preference. Now, HUD does, with that in mind, HUD provides a significant amount of funding to local communities. If you look at just community planning and development funding for 2020 to 2022, this isn't public housing funding, this is just community planning and development. During that time, HUD provided Illinois with just over 1.3 billion. That's with a B.
That's with a B.
Yeah, that's with a B. 1,000 millions. And over 429 million of that went to the city of Chicago. So a well-developed and comprehensive Section 3 plan that's in place that outlines outreach, training, and other quantitative or qualitative efforts to provide that significant economic opportunity to those low and very low income individuals where those projects are being developed and that work is being done, provides a benefit, not only that asset you're receiving through the project, like through the water main or through whatever is being done, but also those skills that are developed by hiring those low and very low income individuals to work on that project within that radius of where it's being done. So that's how the new rule kind of focuses and works on that, and the intent of the rule. The focus on labor hours worked allows us to do that, and it allows us to work with a community to maintain those skills in the community where that activity is being done. Now that a lot of that burden lies with the community that's receiving the funding, because they're the ones that are ultimately responsible for meeting the Section 3 requirements. We're there to assist, lend a hand, support as much as possible, but ultimately a lot of this responsibility lies with the community on the ground. So go on to your next question about over the past year, because that was the question you'd asked me. Again, HUD is still working on the reporting mechanism, because the first public housing report is due the end of June. So it's not even, there's been no report yet on public housing funding on this. CPD just started reporting as of November in their system. So there's not a lot of reporting there, because again, this is the Midwest, the building season doesn't really start until the summer. So I expect that to pick up. But just since November 2021, there's been 2.8 million labor hours worked on Section 3 projects. Of those, 260,000 of those hours were worked by low or very low income workers. And that's nationally, right? If you look at just Illinois, there was about 40,000, a little over 40,000 labor hours reported, and about 9,000 of those were worked by low or very low income workers. So that's what's been reported so far by the recipients. Now, again, this is very early, but you're starting to see some moving of the needle on this. And I expect as the funding starts to flow through the American Rescue Plan funding and the current year allocations, I think you'll start to see more of this happening because Section 3 applies to all that funding.
Okay.
Oh, and one last note is since July, since the new business registry went online, there's been over 1,100 businesses registered, self-certifying as a Section 3 business, and about 100 of them are in the Chicago area. So you're starting to see increase in the number of businesses registering as well.
Okay, so
that's a testament to Nicole because she did really strong outreach last year.
So Nicole, those businesses that are registering, how did you reach them? Through the website?
Yeah, so when we had the old rule, we also had the older business registry. And so we had, I want to say over 500, don't quote me on that, but hundreds of businesses registered on that old registry. And we knew that there was going to be this change with the new rule. So different criteria that Section 3 businesses were going to have to meet. We took an approach where we reached out to a number of businesses on those lists, but we also utilized, 2 or 3 other lists. I wasn't the person that compiled them, but basically they were lists where we knew that it was likely, not certain, that there were Section 3 businesses on there potentially. Okay. And so the idea was to reach out to them in Chicago and basically ask the question. This is what a Section 3 business is. This is what it takes to qualify as such. If you meet the criteria, let's go ahead and put in your information so that you're easy to find if opportunities come up. So we've done a lot of outreach that way. I mean, I live in Chicago. I live in East Garfield Park. I am, well aware of several Section 3 businesses. I will happily talk about Section 3 and ask the question to folks that I think might qualify. It's just been a lot of open conversation, but we've utilized lists in the past that, again, we suspected Section 3 businesses would be on, and just asked the question and did the education piece. This is what it is to qualify, and kind of went from there.
Okay, I think that's what people want to know. What they got to do to qualify, and because
can I ask Nicole
have a lot of small businesses. Yes, go ahead, Libet.
Okay, welcome to East Garfield Park, Nicole.
Thank you.
I've been a resident in East Garfield Park over 20 years, and just part of West Garfield Park pretty much all my life. But Wanda, myself, and George Owens, who's on here, we're part of the Garfield Park Advisory Council.
Oh, wow.
At the Garfield Park Gold Dome. And so I know Wanda's going to be inviting you to present from community perspective. So we look forward to that.
Absolutely. I'll put my information in the chat so you
Excellent.
guys contact me as you wish. Sure, I'd love that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I do have a few follow-up questions, but I would like, I don't know what number we're on.
We're going to number 5, right, Dan? Okay, number 5. Over the last 3 years, how many African-American small businesses have registered through HUD Section 3? Do you have that breakdown?
Well, not strictly that, but I can talk about a little bit about what it is and what it isn't within the registry, and then also there's some other indicators for that I can discuss based on who has registered.
Okay.
So first, it's important to understand what the business registry is. That registry is where businesses go to say, I self-certify that I am a Section 3 business. That you don't actually verify, they're not actually verified as a Section 3 business until they enter into a contract with a Section 3 project or with a Section 3 recipient. So what that allows, that the benefit of being on that registry though, is that those Section 3 residents can do a mass email saying, hey, we have this opportunity. We have this opportunity that's out there for a project or for different funding opportunities, or if it's a housing authority, here's a list of resumes of individuals that are looking for work that would meet a Section 3 worker criteria, so you can maintain your status. So it allows the through the opportunity portal to make those connections. So that's what the registry does. But when they go in there and register, they identify different things. They identify, a business will say, are they hiring? They'll identify if there's a small business, 8A business, a minority owned business, a woman owned business. Those type of things that are designated in there that can be used for other preferences, or they're veteran owned, for example. That those things can be identified so that they can be targeted. You can look for specific preferences. Section 3 refers to local, state, and federal rules. So if there's other local preferences out there or those type of things, that's why those indicators are put in there. So what I can say is that nearly 85% of the businesses that have been registered are 8A businesses, which are small businesses owned by individuals who have been socially or economically disadvantaged. They're minority owned, they're woman owned. So the vast majority of the businesses that are in the registry are minority owned or disadvantaged, owned by those who are economically disadvantaged.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Let's see. How many low and very low income residents were hired over the pay? I guess I didn't put a time on here. Trained and employed in communities where HUD is operating.
Right. So we no longer track just hires, right? We had mentioned it's labor hours. So I can talk, and I mentioned how many labor hours were worked within the community before, but that's where the benchmarks are looking at. We're looking at the benchmarks, and we're looking at, are they meeting the 25% of labor hours worked or worked by very low income workers, and 5% worked by targeted Section 3 workers, which are low or very low income individuals that live in the area. Either you live in the housing authority that's providing the funding or live within a mile radius of where the work's being done. And that's to focus in, like I said, to maintain and develop those communities that are economically disadvantaged. And I mentioned that so let me see, I think I have a number here for direct on the job training. So the labor hours that have gone toward projects that include on the job training, apprenticeships, there are about 86 projects that have been reported since November, and just about 430,000 labor hours were worked on projects that included some kind of apprenticeship program or some kind of on the job training program. Now, again, these numbers are preliminary, but I expect, because these are getting put in, they only had to start reporting for commitments after November. So what you're seeing is you're starting to see this information come in, and as the building season starts, as the construction season starts, I think you'll start seeing more and more of these numbers start to move up.
Okay.
And as we do our outreach and increase the number of Section 3 businesses out there, I think you'll see a significant increase in these numbers as this rule starts to, as communities start to see and develop their plans.
Okay. What's your outreach going to advance to? What else are you going to be doing to do outreach?
Well, again, like I mentioned, with the qualitative, as part of the qualitative portion of a recipient's plan, they have to do that affirmative outreach as part of the section.
Oh, they have to. Okay.
That's the first step. That's always the first step, is the local community, because they know the community better. Like Nicole knows Garfield Park. Am I saying it right? Better than I ever will, right?
Okay.
And that's just the nature of it. So that first line is always those first level recipients of HUD funding.
Okay.
And that includes, and you'll see them partner with other programs. They'll partner with family self-sufficiency programs. They'll partner with Jobs Plus programs. They'll partner with other type programs. The other thing that we're looking at that we're doing is we're partnering with the Small Business Association and putting on different sessions to reach out to businesses to increase the number of businesses that are out there, to not only talk about Section 3, but also access to capital, so that they can see what's available out there through the Small Business Association, as well as what benefits does Section 3 bring, not just within the benchmarks, but how do you tie it in with the Work Opportunity Tax Credit, which provides a federal tax credit for businesses that hire individuals that are on SNAP, that are veteran or disabled. So there's a lot of overlap there between the different programs. And we're also looking at, we're partnering with the International Union of Partners, Allied Trades, Labor International Union, and doing these workforce empowerment sessions that are working out and trying to build apprenticeship programs, trying to build this network of not just on the business side, but also connecting those potential workers with those businesses.
Okay.
And that's the focus area you're starting to see. And I know Nicole's been doing some of that work with CHA, so I want to give her an opportunity to talk a little bit about what's been happening in that area.
Nicole.
Yeah, it's funny. I had kind of talked to Dan in the Illinois field office, just kind of like any field office, right? Our work changes and evolves to meet the needs in the communities and, different communities in Illinois. And Chicago Housing Authority actually happens to be quite self-sufficient when it comes to Section 3. And so, thinking back, gosh, pre-pandemic, a lot of our work in the Illinois office kind of was focused on Central Illinois. We did outreach to Champaign, to Decatur, to Springfield, where we actually traveled. And as Dan was talking about, a lot of that outreach work is to make sure the grantees are up to speed on what the requirements are, how they meet that Section 3 obligation, how they do outreach to, their residents, what types of trainings they're offering, et cetera. So a lot of that outreach pre-pandemic was Central Illinois. 2020, 2021, a lot of it was talking about the new rule, making sure everyone was up to speed on the changes that occurred because of the new rule, making sure that businesses were aware whether or not they met that new criteria for a Section 3 business. But Chicago Housing Authority, which of course, we keep in touch with, but don't have to do a ton of oversight and training because they really kind of have it together. They have their Workforce Opportunity Resource Center. I don't know if any of you have heard about it. It's what they call WORK. They have this work portal. They have this work resource center that essentially the purpose is to provide, resources and tools to their residents, to Section 3 eligible folks and businesses, vendors, even. It's kind of a one-stop shop for, tools and resources.
Okay.
Have like a training calendar on there where you can see trainings that become available. Last time I checked, it hasn't been updated in a couple of months, but typically they're pretty on top of it. So they have this portal, and as Dan mentioned there, we have our business registry and our opportunity portal that we use as a resource that we talk to our grantees about. It was actually modeled after Chicago Housing Authority's work portal. So it's quite a good resource. My understanding is that it has lots of businesses in it currently. Any job seekers, anyone looking for a job, and any contractors, subcontractors can find opportunities in that portal. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunity through Chicago Housing Authority at this point. And so we haven't had to, provide too much of that because it kind of already exists.
Okay.